Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, welcome to Brooklyn. I think it's important for an architect to develop a deep understanding of materials and what is possible with those materials. I mean, what is interesting now, I think, in Korea is also that the demographics, have peaked in a way. This is a project with, I think, 36 units, and there are 30 unique units.
Really?
Yeah.
Developer allowed you to do that?
That's the son of Tom Main. He's a little bit crazy.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Hello channel, this is Wonjali from Architecture Recipe. Today I'm here at the Brooklyn where the Soil Architecture office is located at. Here I'm with Florian Eidenberg, the partner and founder of the Soil Architecture office. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, welcome to Brooklyn.
Thank you for warm welcoming. So today I'm gonna talk about maybe a little bit more about soil because I think a lot of audience know about soil architecture office and project, but maybe we wanna talk about more deeply with who you are, what's your backgrounds, and what's your Liu's, Jing's backgrounds, and how did you guys start this office and your philosophy or vision?
So I'm Dutch originally from the Netherlands. I studied in Delft. At the moment in the 90s, there was a lot of architecture coming out of the Netherlands. I'm sure people are familiar with MVRDV and OMA and these practices. And so when I graduated, either as a student, you could go and work there, go to Rotterdam and work for the super Dutch. Or I realized we needed to go somewhere else, or I needed to find something more than what I had learned in the Netherlands. And when Sejima came by and gave a talk, and I had an opportunity to move to Japan, I realized there's so much more to learn there. Actually, to complement maybe a very rational approach that, say, a Dutch practice has, with something much more intuitive, much more embodied, much more sensitive. And so I spent really 8 years working there trying to just learn and absorb. I met Jing Liu, my partner. She also worked there for a period. Then she went to work for KPF, Kohn Pedersen Fox, here in New York. And so when I had a chance to come to New York with Sana to build 2 museums, so I built the Glass Pavilion in Toledo, Ohio, and then the new Museum of Contemporary Art in New York. And so when that was finished, we decided that New York would be the best place as 2 non-natives, non-Americans in a way, to have an office, better than going to the Netherlands or better than going either to Japan or to China, where Jing is from. And so I think what maybe has affected both of us very much in our thinking is, in a way, these different experiences that we've had throughout our lives in these different contexts. So where maybe Dutch is very rational and very diagrammatic, and I think the intuition and the spatial aspects that we've learned in Japan. And then I would say in the US, it has its own culture and its own way of making buildings. And I think all these things come together in our practice now.
Okay, so I think I'm gonna jump right away to the project. Many people know of you through the project called Kukje Galleries, and we want to know how did you start the Kukje Galleries project?
So that project came because maybe Kukje Gallery is a gallery which has a lot of international artists. They bring international artists to Korea. But if you think about what was asked, it's a neutral space for art. So basically it's a box, right? A big box without anything on the inside.
Favorite place for architecture.
Yeah. And so that's fine, but then we needed to do something extra. The neighborhood around the palace is very fine-grained. There's Hanok homes. It's a very, quite historic neighborhood. And so we felt that this big box would be too aggressive, maybe too diagrammatic. You could say almost too Dutch to just dump it in there.
Right.
And so we thought we need to create a softer boundary in some sort of way, something that maybe we were thinking, maybe we can blur, right, this boundary of this box. And so we were trying to think, how can we create a much softer edge, a more refined. And so how do you create a permanent fog became the question around the building. So then we realized it needs to be something that actually negotiates between the box and the outer skin. I'd always been fascinated with this material, chain link mesh. It's a metal that is very strong, but it's also very soft. It's used for butching, butcher gloves and etc. It doesn't exist on the scale of architecture. So we started to test and basically experiment. Then you maybe know Mike Ra from Front. They're also in Korea now, but we worked together on the Glass Pavilion. So I called Mike and I said, can we try to scale up this thing? And so we collaborated on developing a system.
You have very a deep richness of seeing facade or material, and you look at the envelope in terms of envelope. So
Yeah.
how do you process that? You just told me that you have a lot of experiment, but do you have any certain principle to choose a material or like following a procedure?
I think in the end, as I like to say, a cook, has a lot of flavors to pick from, but an architect doesn't have so many materials to pick from. And so you need to know your materials really well, and you need to understand the nuance between, certain materials. And metal is not just metal. There's a lot of different metals. And so thinking, and understand, like I think we spend a lot of time, if you look also around, there's a lot of material samples lying around here. We're constantly testing. I think the office is a little bit of a mess because we're constantly getting stuff in and experimenting. And it's really like an atelier in that sense. And I think it's important for an architect to develop a deep understanding of materials and what is possible with those materials, because the catalog of things that we have available is very limited. So you need to continue to, push and work with people who are interested in pushing.
Yeah, so next question will be, I've heard that your new book came out.
Yes. So the book, basically, it's 12 projects, residential projects from different scales. And the idea of urban domesticity today, it's not a book about housing, but it's a book about living in the city today and how can architecture support us, living in an urban environment today. So it's moving a little bit away from, say, housing as a crisis and as something where we just need to make as many boxes as possible to accommodate people, but really how can a home empower your life? And so it goes from scale, from private homes we have done here in the neighborhood to large affordable housing rental projects we're building now as well. It's actually an attitude about how we could design today for domestic space in the city.
Oh, very interesting.
I'll give you one.
But speaking to the housing project, I guess, I want to listen to your opinion about Korean housing. What are you thinking about Korean housing, like, trends or like a style? Or...
Well, I think, very similar to maybe in the Netherlands after World War II, very quickly a lot of homes needed to be built. And Korea obviously urbanized very rapidly. And so it meant that the speed of production was very important. And that produced a certain way of building, which obviously repetition is then the model to create speed quickly. But I think now maybe that Korea is developing into a more, maybe I would say the next stage, right? Like after accommodating everybody in a home, you could think more, what can a home do more than just, offer shelter in the most effective. So I think there's an opportunity to diversify some of the housing models. What is interesting now, I think, in Korea is also that the demographics, have peaked in a way. And so really rethinking what will happen to some of these buildings if they're not fully occupied anymore. And maybe there's ways for transformation of some of this building stock.
That sounds like the way that you approach might be the lens of like a little bit of the utilitarian point of view. Is that in my conservative point of view as a Korean, maybe? But I think, which is a good thing. I really respect, because the point that you thinking about the context of like giving an openness of the audience or the users and who are living in that place and connect, like thinking about the fabric of the neighborhood, I think, which is, I think, awesome thing. But I think the issue that I want to talk about in Korea, absolutely, you've seen it. This is a really important thing. Is that we need to, all the housing, apartment or condominium, we need to face down to the south. What are you thinking about, like those kind of culture difference? And then when you come back to, maybe come to visit Korea, it's like, even though you don't know of the regulation, you see the regulation building code compared to the Holland or United States or Japan. Like, what's the difference?
No, but what I'm saying is I think there's a reason why those things happened, right? And I think they're still happening. We were in Daegu the other day where we're working, and still you see, all this sort of repetitive high rises coming up. I think there can be a little bit of variation in that, no? And I have a feeling it's better to find ways to gradually, I think you need to connect better to the ground. I think you can have towers, but the towers need to rise out of a plinth that is connected to the ground. But I do think, increasing differentiation is very important. So for instance, in many of these projects, this is a project with, I think, 36 units, and there are 30 unique units.
Really? Yeah. Developer allowed you to do that?
That's the son of Tom Main. He's a little bit crazy.
Crazy. I think recently in Korean industry really talk about like social housing issue a lot. So can you tell us that maybe what kind of like attitude we should have as architect for the social housing, and maybe do you have any thought into it?
And we did a project in Leon in Mexico, which is actually social housing. And I think maybe even to go back to sort of an original, so Jing and my background and sort of this Dutch attitude, like when I went to Delft, every semester was housing, because in some way the government built housing, and I think housing as part of a social good is very much embedded maybe in our thinking. So architecture should be for everyone in a certain way. And so I don't think there needs to be a differentiation between, certain segments. I think you need to infuse every project for every demographic with the same sort of commitment. So this project we did in Leon in Mexico, which maybe we can show, there's a model also over there, I'll show it later, it's also in here. We had to build 60 homes for, our construction budget was $2.5 million. So this is almost nothing. So we actually developed a stone, this stone, we made for this project, because first we wanted to use precast concrete panel, and then they said, well, it's too expensive because we need, a truck, we need a crane, and so basically we developed one block that's exactly the weight that one person can carry. And so we allowed, we could work with many more people to make a much cheaper building and distribute the budget amongst sort of the workers in a way, rather than to the industry that would, So these are ways in which I think you can make a much more interesting project by just using, a little bit of thinking.
And then maybe this project, I think this is one of the projects made yourself very popular, because like the way that you're also using this mesh fabrication is also associated with the Kukje Gallery, I guess.
So, and if you look around, you see some funny characters also here. And so in general, I think fabric is a fantastic way of thinking about this idea of depth and the layering. We're very interested in layering. So, where glass is just inside, outside, if you can build up sort of depth in layering, and fabric does this a lot. But then fabric is not so easy as an exterior facade material, right? So there's been a lot of experimentation, and we've been working a lot with fabric. In this case, this project was for the Salone in Milan, and it was a temporary conceptual home. So it's mini living, and so the car company realized that their audience, that the people that use cars, they're shifting away from cars towards transportation. And they were trying for a while to expand Mini as a brand, not just from making cars, but also to making jewelry, actually making living. And so this was a prototype for Mini living, meaning their attitude of a younger audience of how to live in the city. And so in that sense, it was a case study house or like a presentation. The other thing here, which is something quite important, is that the skin that this is made of is actually a Japanese product that absorbs toxins from the air. So it's like a filter. And so when air moves through, it takes out the heavy metals. So it has a very slight magnetic coating. And so the air is actually clean that comes through. So the idea was also, it's called Breathe, the project.
Yeah, I feel like you keep saying, or your attitude toward the facade system, you create this kind of like a different layer of the system.
Yes.
Not just like the beautiful facade that you look good, but also it has a function behind, and then it has a different layer of like that associate the human life.
Exactly. Because a facade needs to do a lot of things, right? It needs to keep out the rain, the cold, the sun, the heat, and etc. But if you delaminate those layers and you can live in between them, that's what we're trying to.
Very deep and rich approach, I guess. Yeah, appreciate it for that. This is Architecture Recipe with Florian Eidenberg. Thank you for watching us, and please subscribe and hit the like button, please.